She was everything to me, you know. Every memory I have, she's in it.
My name is Joseph Hawkins. I'm 103 years old, and 3 years ago, I buried the love of my life after 75 years of marriage. But this isn't a story about love, not the kind you think you know. Anyway, the day after Margaret's funeral, I was cleaning out her old jewelry box, you know, the kind with the little ballerina that spins when you open it. Hidden beneath the velvet lining, I found something that made my blood run cold. A letter, sealed, with my name on it, written in her handwriting from decades ago. What I read in that letter, it changed everything I thought I knew about our 75 years together. Everything. And if you're married, engaged, or even thinking about spending your life with someone, you need to hear this. Because your wife, she's probably hiding the same thing from you right now. I'm going to tell you what Margaret wrote. But first, you need to understand our story. Because without context, you'll think I'm just another crazy old man. But by the end of this, you'll realize that every marriage is built on secrets. And some secrets, they're meant to stay buried. Are you ready? Because once you hear this, you can't unhear it. And it might just save your marriage, or destroy everything you believe about love. It was 1945. I was 23. Just came back from the war in Europe. You have to understand, back then, men didn't talk about feelings. We didn't go to therapy. We came home, found a job, found a wife, and got on with life. Simple as that. But simple doesn't mean easy, and it sure doesn't mean right. I met Margaret at a church dance. Now, I wasn't much of a dancer, and I certainly wasn't much to look at. 6 feet tall, skinny as a rail, with hands that shook from what we now call PTSD, but back then we just called being nervous. But Margaret, she was something else. Blonde hair that caught the light like spun gold, blue eyes that seemed to see right through your soul, and a smile that could make you forget you'd just spent tears watching good men die. She was 19, worked at the local telephone company connecting calls. Her hands were always busy, always moving, always doing something useful. That's the first thing I noticed about her. She never wasted a moment. While other girls were primping in mirrors, Margaret was helping the older ladies with their coats, cleaning up spilled punch, making sure everyone felt welcome. Here's your first lesson, and write this down. Don't fall for the prettiest girl in the room. Fall for the kindest one. Pretty fades, but kind. Kind gets stronger with time. I asked her to dance, and she said yes. Not because she was attracted to me. I found that out later. But because I looked like I needed someone to be nice to me. That was Margaret, always thinking about what others needed before what she wanted. We danced to I'll Be Seeing You by Billie Holiday. I stepped on her feet 3 times, apologized for times, and by the end of the song, I was sweating like I'd just run 5 miles. But when the music stopped, she looked up at me and said, "You're trying too hard, Joseph. Just be yourself. Just be yourself." Sounds simple, right? But here's the thing about that advice. It only works if you actually know who you are. And at 23, fresh from war, I had no idea who Joseph Hawkins was supposed to be. I knew who I'd been, a farm boy from Indiana. I knew who I'd pretended to be, a soldier. But who was I now? That was the question that would haunt me for the next 75 years. We started courting, as they called it back then. Every Sunday after church, I'd walk her home. Every Thursday, I'd take her to the picture show. Every Saturday, we'd sit on her parents' porch swing and talk until her father came out to remind us it was getting late. Those early conversations, they were everything. We talked about books, about dreams, about the kind of life we wanted to build. Margaret wanted 3 children, a house with a garden, and a husband who would come home every night for dinner. I wanted to make her happy. That was it. That was my entire life plan. Make Margaret happy. But here's what I didn't understand then, and what most young men don't understand now. You can't make someone else happy. Happiness isn't something you give or receive. It's something you choose every single day. Despite the circumstances, 6 months of courting, and I proposed. Right there on that porch swing, with a ring I'd saved 3 months to buy. It wasn't much, a tiny diamond on a thin gold band. But when I slipped it on her finger, she cried. Happy tears, she said. But looking back now, I wondered ought we married on June 15th, 1946. She wore her mother's dress, and I wore the only suit I owned. The wedding was small, just family and a few friends from church. But it felt like the most important day in the history of the world. We promised to love, honor, and cherish each other until death do us part. And we meant it. God help us. We really meant it. The early years were hard. I worked at the factory, making parts for automobiles. 10-hour days, 6 days a week, coming home with hands black from grease and a back that ached like I was already an old man. Margaret kept house, tended her garden, and waited for me to come home each night. She always had dinner ready, always had a smile, always asked about my day like it was the most interesting thing in the world. But I was young and stupid, and I thought that was just what wives did. I thought love was automatic, like breathing. I didn't know it was work. Hard, daily, never-ending work. Our first fight was about money. Isn't it always? I wanted to buy a radio, something to listen to in the evenings. She wanted to save for a washing machine. We argued for hours, voices getting louder, both of us saying things we didn't mean. Finally, she stormed out of the room, and I heard her crying in the bedroom. I stood there in our little kitchen, feeling like the biggest fool who ever lived. Here was this woman who'd given up her job to marry me, who cooked and cleaned and made our house a home, and I was arguing with her about a damn radio. That's when I learned my second lesson. Being right doesn't matter if being right makes you wrong. I went to her, apologized, and we saved for the washing machine. Took us 8 months, but every week when I put money in that little jar on the kitchen counter, I felt proud. Not because of the money, but because I was choosing her wants over mine. That's what love is, choosing each other. Over and over again. The children came later. First Thomas in 1948, then Sarah in 1950, then little Michael in 1952. 3 babies in 4 years, and suddenly our quiet little house was chaos. Beautiful, exhausting. Wonderful chaos. Margaret was a natural mother, patient when I was irritated, calm when I was panicked, wise when I was confused. Watching her with our children taught me my third lesson. Love isn't just a feeling between 2 people. It's a force that creates more love. The more you give, the more there is. But children change everything. Date nights became family dinners. Private conversations became discussions about diapers and doctors and discipline. Romance became stolen moments after bedtime, when we were both too tired to do much more than hold hands in the darkness. I thought we were growing apart. I thought the spark was dying. I thought maybe this was just what happened to marriages. They started with passion and ended with partnership. But Margaret, she had a different perspective. She always did. Joseph, she said one night, when I complained that we never talked anymore, we're not talking less. We're talking about different things, and these things matter more. She was right. We weren't discussing movies and dreams anymore. We were discussing Tommy's fever and Sarah's first steps and Michael's tendency to put everything in his mouth. We were building a life together, brick by brick, conversation by conversation. The 1950s rolled into the 1960s. The children grew. I got promoted at the factory. We bought a bigger house, a better car, took family vacations to the lake every summer. Life was good. Life was stable. Life was exactly what we'd planned. But something was changing in Margaret. I noticed it first in the way she looked out the window while washing dishes, like she was searching for something just beyond the horizon. Then in the way she'd pause mid-sentence during conversations, as if she'd forgotten what she was going to say. Small things, easy to dismiss. Are you happy? I asked her one evening in 1963, when the children were finally asleep and we had a rare moment alone. She looked at me for a long time before answering. What a question. Joseph, it's a simple question. No, she said softly. It's the most complicated question in the world. That should have been my clue. That should have been the moment I dug deeper, asked more questions, really listened to what she wasn't saying. But I was a man of my generation, raised to believe that as long as my family was fed and housed and healthy, I was doing my job right. I missed the signs. I missed so many signs. The 1960s became the 1970s. The children became teenagers, with all the drama and chaos that brought. Tommy wanted to grow his hair long and protest the war. Sarah wanted to wear miniskirts and go to rock concerts. Michael wanted to quit school and join a band. Margaret handled it all with grace I never could have managed. How do you stay so calm? I asked her during one particularly difficult evening when all three kids had been testing boundaries. I remember being their age. She said, I remember wanting to be heard, to be understood, to matter. So I listen, really listen, not just to what they're saying, but to what they need. That was Margaret, always seeing deeper, understanding more, caring about the why behind the what. She made me a better father, a better man, just by being herself. The children left home one by one. Tommy to college, then law school. Sarah to nursing school, then marriage to a good man who loved her fierce independence. Michael to California to chase his music dreams. Suddenly, it was just Margaret and me again, like it had been in the beginning. I thought this would be our time, our chance to rediscover each other, to travel, to enjoy the fruits of our labor. But Margaret seemed more distant than ever. She joined clubs, volunteered at the hospital, took up painting. Good things, meaningful things, but things that didn't include me. We should travel. I suggested one evening over dinner. See Europe, take that honeymoon we never had. Maybe. She said, but her heart wasn't in it. She was looking out that window again, searching for something I couldn't see. The 1980s and 1990s passed in a comfortable routine. Grandchildren came, 7 of them, each one a blessing that brought new life to our marriage. Margaret was a natural grandmother, just as she'd been a natural mother. She had infinite patience for their questions, endless energy for their games, boundless love for their quirks and challenges. Watching her with our grandchildren, I felt that old spark again. This woman who'd chosen me, who'd built a life with me, who'd raised our children and now was helping raise theirs. She was remarkable. How had I gotten so lucky? But luck, I was learning, wasn't enough. Love wasn't enough. Even good intentions weren't enough. Marriage required something more. Something I was only beginning to understand in my 60s and 70s. It required seeing your partner clearly. Not as you wanted them to be. Not as they used to be. Not as you thought they should be. But as they actually were. And that was where I'd been failing for decades. Margaret turned 75 in 2001. I threw her a surprise party. Invited all the children and grandchildren. made a speech about how blessed I was to have her as my wife. Everyone cried. Everyone said it was beautiful. Everyone said we were the perfect couple. But that night, when we were alone, Margaret sat on the edge of our bed and looked at me with such sadness in her eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Didn't you like the party?" "The party was lovely, Joseph. You're always so thoughtful. Then what is it?" She was quiet for so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, so softly I almost missed it, she said, "Sometimes I wonder if you really see me." "What do you mean?" "Of course I see you, do you? Or do you see the wife you think you have? The mother of your children? The grandmother of your grandchildren? The woman who keeps your house and cooks your meals and smiles at your jokes?" I didn't understand. I thought I was seeing her clearly. I thought I knew everything there was to know about Margaret after 55 years of marriage. I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong. The 2000s brought new challenges. Health scares, lost friends, the inevitable reminders that we weren't young anymore. Margaret developed arthritis in her hands, those same hands that had been so busy and useful all her life. She couldn't garden as much, couldn't sew, couldn't write letters like she used to. I tried to help, but she was fiercely independent. I can still do things, Joseph. I just do them differently now. Different. That word would come to define our final years together. Everything was different, and I was struggling to adapt. In 2010, at age 84, Margaret had her first heart attack. Mild, the doctors said, but a warning. She needed to slow down, reduce stress, take better care of herself. For the first time in our marriage, I became the caregiver instead of the cared for. I learned to cook, badly, but with love. I learned to do laundry, shrinking several of her favorite dresses in the process. I learned to grocery shop, to clean house, to do all the things she'd been doing for decades, while I worked and provided and thought that was enough. "You don't have to wait on me," she said one morning when I brought her breakfast in. "Bed, I want to," I replied. And I meant it. For the first time in our marriage, I truly understood what she'd been giving me all those years. Not just service, but love made tangible, care made real. Those last 10 years, from 2010 to 2020, were simultaneously the hardest and the most beautiful of our marriage. We had to learn new rhythms, new roles, new ways of being together. Some days were wonderful. Quiet mornings with coffee and newspapers, evenings watching old movies, visits from children and grandchildren that filled our house with laughter. Other days were difficult. Margaret's health was unpredictable. She had good days and bad days, and I never knew which I'd wake up to. She became frustrated with her limitations, and I became frustrated with my helplessness. We had arguments we'd never had before, about things that had never mattered before, but we also had conversations we'd never had before. Deep, honest, real conversations about life and death and meaning and regret. Margaret began telling me stories from her childhood I'd never heard, sharing thoughts and feelings she'd kept private for decades. "Why didn't you tell me these things before?" I asked one evening after she'd shared a particularly moving memory about her father. "You never asked," she said simply, "and I wasn't sure you'd want to know." That hit me like a punch to the gut. How many stories had I missed? How many thoughts and feelings and dreams had she kept to herself because I'd never bothered to ask? Margaret died on March 15th, 2020, peacefully, in her sleep, with me holding her hand. The last thing she said to me was, "Thank you for trying, Joseph. Thank you for loving me the best way you knew how." The funeral was small due to the pandemic. Just immediate family. A simple service. Burial next to her parents in the old cemetery on the hill. I spoke about her kindness, her strength, her devotion to family. Everything I said was true. but it felt incomplete. There was so much more to Margaret than the role she'd played in our lives. The days after the funeral were the longest of my life. The house felt empty, not just of her presence but of purpose. What was I supposed to do now? How was I supposed to live without the woman who'd been my compass for 75 years? That's when I decided to clean out her things, not to get rid of them. I wasn't ready for that, but to organize them, to preserve them, to make sense of the life we'd built together. Her jewelry box was the last thing I touched. That little wooden box with the ballerina that spun when you opened it. She'd had it since she was a child. Kept all her treasures in it. Her wedding ring when she did dishes. Her pearl earrings from our anniversary. The locket with pictures of the children. But as I lifted out the velvet tray, I felt something underneath. Paper, folded and yellowed with age. And when I unfolded it, I found an envelope with my name written in Margaret's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter, 3 pages, front and back, dated 1962, the year I'd asked if she was happy. The year she'd said it was the most complicated question in the world. This is what the letter said. My dearest Joseph, if you were reading this, it means I'm gone and you finally found what I never had the courage to give you while I was alive. I'm writing this because I need you to know the truth. Even if I can never say it out loud. I fell in love with someone else. His name was David Morrison. He was the new minister at church, young and passionate about changing the world. He came to our town in 1961, and from the moment I met him, everything in my life shifted. Not because he was handsome, though he was, or because he paid attention to me, though he did, but because when I talked to him, I felt like myself for the first time in years. You have to understand, Joseph, I loved you, I still love you, but somewhere in the middle of being your wife and the children's mother and the woman everyone expected me to be, I lost track of Margaret. I forgot who she was. What she wanted, what made her feel alive. David reminded me, not intentionally. He was a good man, an honorable man. But when we talked about books, about ideas, about the world beyond our little town, I remembered that I had thoughts and opinions and dreams that had nothing to do with laundry or dinner or whether Tommy had finished his homework. We never acted on our feelings. Never so much as held hands. But for 6 months, I lived for our conversations after church, for the way he looked at me when I spoke, for the person I became when I was with him. Then one Sunday, he announced he was leaving, called to a church in California. He never said goodbye to me personally, never acknowledged what had passed between us. He just left. That's when I realized what a fool I'd been. Not because I'd fallen in love with another man, but because I'd been looking for someone else to make me feel whole when the problem wasn't you, Joseph. The problem was me. I had spent 15 years of our marriage waiting for you to see me, to understand me, to ask me the right questions. But I never told you what I needed. I never spoke up. I never said, Joseph, I'm drowning in this life we've built, and I need you to throw me a rope. Instead, I smiled and cooked and cleaned and raised our children and pretended that being good at those things was the same as being happy doing them. After David left, I made a choice. I could leave you and the children and follow my heart to California, or I could stay and learn to love the life I'd chosen. I chose to stay, not because it was easy, but because it was right. But staying meant changing. It meant finding ways to be Margaret inside the role of wife and mother. It meant speaking up about what I needed, even when it felt selfish. It meant asking you to see me, really see me, instead of just waiting for you to figure it out on your own. And slowly, over the years, you did. You started asking about my thoughts, my feelings, my dreams. You started noticing when I was sad or frustrated or excited about something. You started loving me instead of just loving the idea of me. That's why I never gave you this letter. Because by the time I should have, it was no longer true. Not the part about loving David. That was real and it mattered. But the part about feeling unseen, unloved, unknown. You fixed that, Joseph. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough that when I look back on our 75 years together, I don't regret staying. I don't regret choosing you, choosing us, choosing this life, even knowing what I know about what might have been. But I want you to understand something, because this is important. Marriage isn't just about love. It's about choice. Every day, you have to choose each other. But you can't make that choice honestly unless you know who you're choosing. I spent too many years hiding parts of myself because I thought they would threaten our marriage. My doubts, my dreams, my needs, my frustrations. I thought good wives didn't have those things, or if they did, they kept them private. I was wrong. Good marriages aren't built on hiding. They're built on honesty, messy, complicated, sometimes painful honesty. If you could live our marriage over again, I would want you to ask me harder questions. I would want you to push me to be more honest about what I needed. I would want us to fight more, not less, because fighting honestly is better than agreeing dishonestly. Most of all, I would want you to know that loving someone means seeing all of them, the good and the bad, the strong and the weak, the parts they're proud of and the parts they wish they could change. You loved me the best way you knew how, Joseph. But I wish I'd taught you to love me better. And I wish I'd learned to ask for what I needed instead of hoping you'd guess. This is my gift to you now. In whatever time you have left, don't settle for surface love. Don't assume you know someone just because you've lived with them for decades. Keep asking questions. Keep learning, keep choosing each other, not just once, but over and over again. And if you're ever tempted to think our marriage was perfect because we stayed together for 75 years, remember this letter. Remember that staying isn't the same as thriving. Remember that good enough isn't good enough when it comes to love. I hope this doesn't hurt you too much. I hope it helps you understand that even good marriages have cracks, and that's okay. It's how we deal with the cracks that matters. I love you, Joseph. I choose you every day for 75 years, and I would choose you again. Your devoted wife, Margaret. I read that letter 3 times before the words really sank in. Then I sat in my empty house and cried like I hadn't cried since I was a child. Not because Margaret had loved someone else. I could understand that. Love isn't a limited resource. Having feelings for David didn't diminish what she felt for me. I cried because of what she said about good enough not being good enough. I cried because I realized how much time we wasted being polite instead of honest with each other. I cried because I understood, finally, what she'd meant when she asked if I really saw her. For too many years, I'd seen the wife I wanted her to be instead of the woman she was. I'd loved my idea of Margaret instead of Margaret herself. And while she'd eventually helped me learn to love her better, how much fuller could our marriage have been if I'd learned that lesson earlier? So here's what I want to tell you. Whether you're newly married or celebrating your golden anniversary, your spouse is not who you think they are. They are more complicated, more interesting, more human than your day-to-day life together reveals. Ask them questions you've never asked. What do they dream about? What scares them? What do they wish they'd done differently? What do they need from you that they've never been brave enough to request? And when they answer, really listen. Don't defend yourself. Don't explain why they're wrong. Don't fix or solve or dismiss. Just listen. Just see them. Love isn't just a feeling. It's a skill. And like any skill, you can get better at it if you practice. But you have to be willing to be bad at it first. You have to be willing to ask awkward questions and have uncomfortable conversations and admit that you don't know everything about the person you've pledged to spend your life with. Margaret and I had a good marriage, but it could have been a great marriage if we'd been more honest with each other from the beginning. If we'd fought better, loved deeper, chosen more intentionally. Don't wait until it's too late to really see your spouse. Don't assume that time together equals understanding. Don't settle for good enough when extraordinary is possible. And if your wife has never told you about the dreams she's set aside, the fears she carries, the ways she wishes you'd love her better, it's not because she doesn't have them. It's because she's waiting for you to ask. So ask. Today, tonight, right now. Ask. And then listen like your marriage depends on it. Because it does. My name is Joseph Hawkins. I'm 103 years old, and I'm still learning how to love the woman I was married to for 75 years. The lesson isn't that she kept a secret from me. The lesson is that I never gave her a safe space to share it. Don't make my mistake. Love better, love deeper, love with your eyes wide open. Your marriage will thank you for it, and so will your spouse.